Why banks fear people with $30,000 saved. You finally did it. You've got $30,000 sitting in your savings account, and honestly, it feels kind of amazing. Not life-changing money exactly, but enough that you're not checking your balance with anxiety every time you need to buy groceries. Enough that you could handle a real emergency without spiraling into debt. Enough that you're starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, you've got your financial life somewhat together. But then something strange starts happening. Your bank sends you emails about investment products. Financial advisors you've never met start calling you. You get targeted ads for wealth management services. Your bank suddenly cares about you in a way they absolutely did not when you had $3,000, and you think, what changed? Why does everyone suddenly want a piece of this? My name is Jack, and I spend way too much time thinking about banking psychology, financial incentives, and specifically the moment when people cross certain wealth thresholds that completely change their relationship with financial institutions. And what I've just discovered is that $30,000 isn't just an arbitrary number. It's approximately the point where you stop being a profitable customer in the way banks traditionally make money from regular people, and you start becoming someone who might actually take your money somewhere else. Somewhere that offers you better returns. Somewhere that doesn't rely on your financial ignorance to make a profit. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that banks don't advertise. They make most of their money from people who carry balances, who overdraft, who don't understand how credit works, who keep large amounts of cash sitting in low-interest accounts, people who, frankly, aren't financially sophisticated enough to demand better. But once you cross a certain savings threshold, somewhere around $30,000 for most people, you start to wake up to the fact that your money could be working a lot harder for you. And that makes you dangerous from the bank's perspective. So if you've recently hit this milestone, or if you're working toward it and wondering what changes when you get there, this is for you. Because understanding why banks treat you differently at different wealth levels isn't just interesting. It's the key to making much smarter decisions about what to do with your money once you've actually accumulated some. The profitability problem you create. Let's start with something most people don't think about. You, as a customer with $30,000 in savings, are actually kind of a problem for traditional banks. Not because they don't want your money, they absolutely do. But because you're starting to reach the point where you're aware enough to be unprofitable in the traditional sense. Think about how banks make money from regular checking and savings accounts. They pay you, what, maybe 0.5% interest on your savings if you're lucky? Meanwhile, they're lending that money out at 7% for mortgages, 10% for car loans, 20% for credit cards. The spread between what they pay you and what they charge borrowers is where they make their profit. But here's the thing. When you only have $5,000 in savings, you're probably not thinking too hard about that 0.5% interest rate. You're just happy to have an emergency fund. You're not shopping around for better rates. You're not considering high-yield savings accounts or money market funds. The bank can pay you basically nothing, and you accept it because you don't know better, or you're just grateful to have savings at all. But once you hit $30,000, suddenly that 0.5% interest rate feels insulting. You're making $150 a year on 30 grand while inflation is running at 3%, meaning you're actually losing purchasing power. You start Googling best savings account rates, and you discover that online banks are paying 4% or 5%. You realize your bank is basically using your $30,000 for free and you're subsidizing their profit margins. And this is the shift that banks fear. You becoming financially aware enough to realize you're getting a terrible deal. Because once you move that $30,000 to a high-yield savings account somewhere else, the bank loses a cheap source of capital. They now have to pay competitive rates to keep your deposits, which cuts into their profit margins significantly. I watched this happen with a friend who had been banking with the same institution for 15 years. She finally hit $40,000 in savings and mentioned it to a financially savvy coworker who immediately asked what interest rate she was getting. When she said 0.25%, her coworker practically had a heart attack and spent the next hour showing her how to move it to an account earning 4.5%. The bank lost $40,000 in deposits that day. Deposits they'd been using to fund loans while paying her essentially nothing. That's exactly the scenario banks want to avoid, and it happens most often when people cross that $30,000 threshold where they start paying attention. You're no longer fee dependent. Dependent. Here's another thing that changes at $30,000. You're probably not generating fee revenue anymore, and banks hate that. Banks make enormous amounts of money from fees. Overdraft fees, monthly maintenance fees, ATM fees, wire transfer fees, minimum balance fees, you name it. These fees disproportionately hit people with low account balances because those are the people who occasionally overdraft, who can't maintain the minimum balance to waive monthly fees, who are living close enough to the edge that a single unexpected expense causes problems. But when you have $30,000 in savings, you're basically immune to most of these fees. You're never going to overdraft because you have a huge cushion. You easily meet any minimum balance requirements. You can absorb wire transfer fees or ATM fees without thinking twice because they're trivial relative to your account balance. From the bank's perspective, you've gone from a customer who generates $300 to $500 a year in fee revenue to a customer who generates basically zero fee revenue. That's a significant loss, especially when you multiply it across thousands of customers. And this creates a perverse incentive structure. Banks are financially motivated to keep you poor. Not explicitly, obviously. They're not actively trying to sabotage you. But their business model profits from financial fragility. They make more money from someone with $2,000 who occasionally overdraws than from someone with $30,000 who never does. This is why financial education is not really in traditional banks' best interest. An educated customer is a less profitable customer. Someone who understands how to maintain balances, who knows how to avoid fees, who knows where to get better interest rates, that person is basically useless from a traditional banking profit perspective. I remember when I first understood this dynamic, it felt almost offensive. Like the institution I trusted with my money was actually incentivized to keep me financially vulnerable. That's messed up. But it's also just the reality of how the business model works. And once you have enough money saved to be immune to fee extraction, you start seeing the game more clearly. The investment product push. So if banks can't make money from you through interest rate spreads and fees anymore, how do they try to keep you profitable? By selling you investment products. And this is where things get interesting and potentially dangerous for you. Once you hit that $30,000 mark, you'll notice you start getting contacted about investment opportunities. Maybe it's a banker calling to talk about managed portfolios. Maybe it's emails about annuities, or whole life insurance, or structured products. Maybe it's an invitation to meet with their wealth management division. And here's what you need to understand. These products often have much higher fees than simple index funds, and those fees go straight to the bank. A managed portfolio might charge 1% annually in management fees. An annuity might have 2% to 3% in various embedded costs. Whole life insurance might have massive commissions and ongoing fees. On $30,000, a 1% annual fee is $300 a year. That might not sound like much, but over 20 years, that's $6,000 in fees plus all the compound growth you missed out on. And $6,000 in fee revenue from one customer is way better, from the bank's perspective, than the $150 they were making on your savings account. This is the new profit model for customers with money. Sell them complicated products with high fees that are just opaque enough that most people don't fully understand what they're paying. And target these products specifically at people with $25,000 to $100,000, enough money that fees generate significant revenue, but not so much money that they're not sophisticated enough to know better. I know someone who got sold a variable annuity by their bank when they mentioned having $50,000 to invest for retirement. The banker made it sound like this sophisticated, personalized investment strategy. In reality, it was loaded with fees and restrictions, and they would have done way better with a simple mix of low-cost index funds. But they trusted their bank, and the bank took advantage of that trust to generate commission revenue. The moment you have $30,000 saved, you become a target for this kind of sales activity. And the bank's goal is to convert you from a deposit customer they can't profit from into an investment customer they can extract ongoing fees from. Understanding this dynamic is crucial to protecting yourself. You have options now. Here's the thing that really makes banks nervous about customers with $30,000. You have options. Real options. And options create competition, which drives down bank profits. When you have $3,000 in savings, you're kind of stuck with whatever bank you're using. Moving banks for a slightly better interest rate isn't worth the hassle for such a small amount. You don't qualify for premium banking services. You're not an attractive customer to credit unions or online banks that want larger deposits. But with $30,000, suddenly everyone wants your business. Online banks will offer you 4% or 5% interest rates to move your money to them. Credit unions will waive fees and offer better rates. Investment firms will let you open brokerage accounts with low minimums. You have leverage. And this leverage completely changes the power dynamic. Instead of accepting whatever terms your bank offers, you can shop around. You can demand better rates. You can leave if you don't like how you're being treated. You're no longer a captive customer, and banks hate losing captive customers. This is why you'll sometimes see banks offer retention bonuses when you try to leave with a significant amount of money. They'll suddenly find a better interest rate they can offer you, or waive fees they were previously charging, or upgrade your account status. None of this was available when you had less money, but now that you're threatening to leave with $30,000, suddenly they're willing to negotiate. The key insight is that your money has power, but only if you're willing to use it. A lot of people hit $30,000 in savings and just leave it wherever it's been sitting, earning nothing, because they don't realize they now have enough to demand better treatment. I moved my savings from a traditional bank to an online high-yield savings account when I hit around $25,000, and the difference was stark. I went from earning maybe $100 a year to earning over $1,000 a year on the same money just by taking an afternoon to open a new account and transfer funds. That's a 10 times improvement for a few hours of work. But I never would have done it if I hadn't realized I had options. The wealth threshold psychology. There's something else that happens around $30,000 that banks are aware of, and it's psychological rather than purely financial. This is approximately the point where people start thinking of themselves differently. You stop thinking, I'm just trying to get by, and start thinking, I'm building wealth. And that psychological shift changes your entire approach to money. You start reading about investing. You start thinking long-term. You start asking questions about retirement accounts and tax optimization and asset allocation. You become an educated consumer of financial services instead of a passive recipient. From a bank's perspective, this is dangerous because educated customers are harder to profit from. They ask about fees. They compare products. They read the fine print. They're not going to blindly accept whatever the banker recommends just because the banker has a nice office and sounds authoritative. There's this interesting inflection point in financial sophistication that tends to happen somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 in savings. Below that, most people are in survival mode, just trying to keep their heads above water. Above that, people start optimizing, planning, strategizing. They transition from defense to offense in their financial lives, and banks built their retail business models around customers who are in survival mode. Customers who don't have time or energy to optimize. Customers who are grateful just to have banking services available. Customers who won't leave over a few percentage points of interest because they're too stressed about other things to focus on it. But you, with your $30,000 saved, you're starting to exit survival mode. You have breathing room. You have the mental space to think about optimization. And that makes you much less profitable and much more likely to leave for a competitor. What you should actually do, all right. So, if you've got $30,000 saved, or you're working toward that goal, what should you actually do with this information? First, recognize that you're now in a position of power. You have enough money that financial institutions want your business, so that leverage. Shop around for better interest rates. Don't accept whatever your current bank offers just out of inertia. At minimum, your emergency fund, let's say $10,000 to $15,000 of that $30,000, should be in a high-yield savings account earning something close to current short-term interest rates. As I'm recording this, that's around 4% to 5% at competitive online banks. If you're earning less than 3%, you're leaving significant money on the table. Second, be extremely skeptical of investment products sold by your bank. If a banker reaches out to talk to you about investing, that's fine. Listen to what they have to say. But then go do your own research. Compare what they're offering to low-cost index funds. Look up the fees. Understand what you're paying for. In most cases, you'll find that a simple 3-fund portfolio of low-cost index funds beats whatever complex product the bank is selling, and with fees that are 90% lower. You don't need a managed portfolio on $30,000. You need to put it in a mix of stock and bond index funds and leave it alone. Third, start thinking about tax-advantaged accounts. If you haven't maxed out your IRA contributions, do that before you invest in a taxable account. If your employer offers a 401k match and you're not taking it, fix that immediately. These are basically guaranteed returns that dwarf anything you'll get from a savings account. Fourth, use this milestone as motivation to keep building. $30,000 is great, but it's not enough to retire on or anything. The good news is that wealth building accelerates once you have a foundation. Your second $30,000 will come faster than your first because you'll have investment returns helping you along. And finally, don't let banks make you feel like you need to do something complicated with your money just because you've hit a certain threshold. Simple strategies work. High yield savings for your emergency fund, low cost index funds for long term investing, tax advantaged accounts before taxable ones. That's basically the whole playbook, and it doesn't require paying anyone fees to execute. The bigger picture. Look, the reason this matters isn't just about squeezing an extra percentage point of interest out of your savings account. It's about understanding the game that's being played and who benefits from what. Banks are not your friends. They're businesses designed to extract profit from you. That's not evil, it's just capitalism. But you need to understand the incentive structures at play so you can make decisions that benefit you rather than them. When you have $30,000 saved, you've reached a point where the traditional banking model stops working in your favor. You're too financially stable to generate fee revenue, too aware to accept terrible interest rates, too educated to buy high-fee investment products without questioning them. This is actually a good problem to have. It means you've succeeded in building financial stability. It means you're ready to graduate from basic banking to more sophisticated financial strategies. It means you have options and leverage. But a lot of people don't realize this transition has happened. They keep banking the same way they did when they had $5,000, even though their situation has completely changed. They leave $30,000 in a checking account, earning nothing because that's where it's always been. They don't realize they've entered a new phase where they can and should demand better. The moment you cross $30,000 in savings is the moment you should reassess your entire relationship with your bank. Ask yourself, am I getting competitive interest rates? Am I being charged unnecessary fees? Are there better options available to me now that I have a meaningful amount of capital? The answers will probably surprise you. And acting on those answers, moving money to better accounts, refusing expensive investment products, leveraging your options, is how you transition from someone banks profit from to someone who profits from intelligent use of banking services. You worked hard to save that $30,000. Don't let your bank profit from your success more than you do. Take control, demand better, and recognize that you're now playing a different game with different rules. And in this new game, you have way more power than you probably realize.